Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. We were supposed to be out here running drills. That's all. A simple training exercise. Nothing fancy. Just boots in the dirt, rifles over shoulders, and a checklist from command we had to go through before we rotated back to base. I've done it a dozen times before, different terrain, different people, same deal. This time, we were in the middle of nowhere, a patch of forest in northern Idaho. The kind of place where you could yell your lungs out and nobody would hear you but the trees. There were 9 of us in the squad. I knew most of them, and the rest I trusted enough to watch my 6. That's how it goes. You don't have to like everyone, but you do have to believe they'll pull you out of a jam if something hits the fan. It was early morning when the first signs showed up. We had just wrapped a simulated recon and were regrouping by the transport trucks, laughing about how Miller tripped over a log and almost cracked his radio. That's when our radios lit up with a burst of static. Then a voice, garbled, urgent. All units, code red, repeat code red, do not engage, evacuate immediately. Then nothing. We all just stared at each other, waiting for someone to laugh or say it was part of the exercise. Nobody did. Sergeant Ramirez, our squad lead, stepped up. He tried to get base on the line, but all he got was white noise. Radio silence could be part of the drill, he muttered, not sounding convinced. Let's stay sharp and move to fallback point Charlie. That was an hour's hike uphill, I didn't question it. The forest felt wrong as we marched. I don't mean in that spooky Halloween night kind of way. It felt off. Birds were quiet. No wind. Just the sound of our boots and breathing. Even the squirrels seemed to have vanished. Then came the smell. I didn't notice it at first. Just a faint tang in the air, like something left too long in the sun. But after another mile, it got worse. Like rot. Like old meat in a sealed locker. I pulled my scarf over my face, but it didn't help much. Private Lang was the first to say it. Smells like something died out here. We crested a hill and spotted the cabin, one of those emergency ranger outposts. Ramirez signaled for silence and sent me and Jackson to sweep it before the others moved in, standard procedure. I wish I hadn't gone in first. The door was open, swaying gently. Inside, it looked like someone had tried to barricade the place. Furniture pushed against the walls, broken glass on the floor, and in the corner, slumped against the far wall, was a man. At least, I think it had been a man. His skin was pale, bluish, almost translucent in places. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. His mouth was open in a silent scream, and his hands, they were torn, like he'd tried to claw his way through the wooden floor. No blood on the ground, just black smears. I froze. Jackson didn't. He stepped in and crouched beside the body. What in the... he started, then stopped. I saw his face twist in confusion. The thing twitched. I'm not talking about some leftover nerve jolt. Its fingers curled. Then one leg shifted. Jackson jumped back. That's when it sat up. Not fast, not like in the movies. Just slow and awful. Like it was pulling itself out of a dream. Its jaw cracked as it moved, like it had forgotten how to use its own face. Then it looked at Jackson. Not with human eyes. Not with anything that felt like a person was behind them. It launched at him with a howl that didn't sound like it came from lungs. Jackson screamed, a sound that tore out of him like a reflex, and stumbled back, smashing into a shelf as the thing lunged. I raised my rifle and shouted for it to stop, but it didn't even pause. It tackled him like an animal, snarling, its hands clawing at his gear. I fired. 3 shots, center mass. It didn't drop. It twitched, jerked, but didn't fall. Instead, it turned its head toward me with that gaping mouth, and in the dead light of its eyes, I swear I saw nothing. No pain, no confusion, just hunger. That's when Jackson jammed his boot into its chest and kicked with everything he had. It flew back into the wall, knocking a chair over, giving me the half-second I needed to grab Jackson by the vest and drag him out the door. "Contact in the cabin," I shouted. The others were already moving. Ramirez had his rifle up before I could even get the words out. "What the—" The thing staggered out of the doorway, dragging its leg, arms still twitching. It was making a sound, a low moan, guttural and wet, like its lungs were full of sludge. Everyone saw it. Everyone froze. Then Miller opened fire. It buckled under the barrage, but even as it fell, it tried to reach for us. It didn't care about cover, didn't flinch from the noise, didn't hesitate, just kept coming. When it finally stopped moving, we stood in stunned silence. The body was shredded, unrecognizable. Jackson was gasping, trembling. "It jumped me," he said. "It wasn't right, it wasn't human." I checked him for wounds, nothing visible, just a few scrapes. Ramirez took control fast. "This isn't training. This isn't anything we're prepped for. I don't know what's going on, but we're moving to the evac zone now. No more delays. Lock it up, stay tight, and keep your safeties off." No one argued. As we moved, I caught bits of whispered conversation. Someone said the word infected. Another mentioned a chemical spill, but nobody had answers. We'd all seen war games, staged wounds, dummies rigged to move. But that thing in the cabin was no dummy. The woods were darker now. It wasn't even noon, but the sky was clouding fast, and the air had that heavy, pressurized feeling you get before a storm. We moved in 2 columns, sweeping the area as we hiked. Every broken twig made someone flinch. Then Lang spotted the second one. We were passing through a narrow creek when he froze, pointing to the opposite bank. Something was there, half hidden in the underbrush. At first, I thought it was a wounded deer. Then it stood. A woman, barefoot, clothes torn and stained. She looked like she'd wandered out of some forgotten place. Her arms hung loosely at her sides, and her head twitched, like she was listening to something far away. Lang raised his voice. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Her head snapped toward him with a sickening jerk. Then she charged. Ramirez yelled, "Drop her!" But Lang hesitated. It wasn't until she was nearly on him that he fired. 3 rounds, all hit. She fell, but didn't stay down. She scrambled to her feet like a puppet on broken strings and lunged again. This time, everyone fired. It wasn't clean, it wasn't pretty, but eventually she stopped moving. We stood there, breathing hard, guns shaking in our hands. "This is real," someone whispered. "This is actually happening." Then our radios came back online. Not with command, not with bass. With static and a voice distorted, panicked, almost unintelligible. "Do not trust the infected. Destroy the brain. Burn everything if you have to. Containment has failed." Then the signal cut. Ramirez stared down at the radio like it had just cursed him. "Keep moving," he said, more quietly now. "We're getting out of here." We didn't know it yet, but the forest wasn't the worst of it. The worst was coming. We marched in silence for another mile. The deeper we went into the trees, the more the air pressed down on us. Thick, damp, wrong. The birds hadn't returned. No insects either. Just the shuffle of our feet and the occasional whispered curse. I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder. We all could feel it. like we were being watched. Eventually, we reached a clearing where the evac chopper was supposed to land. That was the plan. Rendezvous here, signal with smoke, get flown out. We were right on time. But the clearing was empty. No signal, no chopper. No noise but the wind sliding through the grass like a warning. Ramirez slammed a fresh mag into his rifle. "Set perimeter," he said through clenched teeth. "Two-man watch. Rest, hydrate, and prep for evac fallback." He was doing his best to keep control, but I could see it in his face. The doubt. This was more than a failed pickup. Something bigger was unraveling. While we regrouped, I climbed a short ridge for better radio reception. I tried every channel, base, nearby outposts, civilian emergency bands. Nothing solid. Just bursts of chatter, static, and one repeated phrase, over and over. Asset containment failure, all zones compromised. Proceed with extreme caution. Every word made my stomach sink deeper. When I came back down, I found the others clustered around Ramirez. Lang had pulled out a small drone, training model with basic optics, and launched it to scout the nearby area. We watched its feed from a tablet. For a minute, it was just treetops. Then it caught something. A road, half-paved, cutting through the forest. There were vehicles. At least 3. Civilian SUVs. One was on its side, another had its doors wide open. The third, that one was moving. Not the engine, the people, they were surrounding it. Maybe 6 or 7 figures, shambling slowly, arms twitching, heads lolling side to side like their necks couldn't support them. All wore normal clothes. Some had bright red smears down their fronts. Others looked half torn open. In the middle, someone was still alive. Trapped on the hood, waving frantically, screaming, though we couldn't hear it. And no help was coming. Ramirez took one look and said, "We're not going that way." We rerouted toward the river, hoping to follow it downstream toward a ranger station marked on our map. That was our new plan. Follow the water, reach shelter, try for a land-based evac. But the forest didn't want us to leave. Half an hour later, we started hearing the cries. Not human cries, not exactly. They were higher-pitched, echoing, guttural, and close. The first time we saw one in motion, it was crawling, arms and legs moving like a spider's, darting between trees faster than any of us could aim. It wasn't even upright. Just a blur of skin and teeth and tangled limbs. We stopped walking, trained our rifles in every direction. That's when we realized they were circling us. One by one, shadows moved between the trunks. You could just barely make out the pale skin, the twitching heads, the unnatural angles of their limbs. They moved like predators. Like they were hurting us. We didn't wait. "Move!" Ramirez barked. "Tight formation. Fire only if they close in." We broke into a jog, weapons up, scanning constantly. Jackson kept murmuring, "They're learning. They're watching us." Like he couldn't believe it himself. I tried not to believe it either, until we saw what they'd left behind. A clearing, small, looks like it had been used for a picnic once. Old fire ring, rusted bench. And in the middle, 3 bodies. One was military, one was civilian. The third, that one had no face left. Pinned to a tree was a flare gun. Fired, spent. They tried to signal for help. Ramirez didn't say a word, just looked up at the gray sky, then back at us. His voice was calm. Too calm. "We're not the first out here," he said, "but we're going to be the last one standing." Nobody argued. Not anymore. The sun never really came out again that day. It hung above the trees like a weak bulb behind storm glass, barely pushing light through the thick clouds. The air kept getting colder, the wind sharper. Not enough to freeze us, but enough to chill everything to the bone. We stuck close to the river. It wasn't deep, but it was fast, churning gray water foaming over rocks. Lang said the ranger station should have been about 4 miles east. If it was still standing, it might have radios, food, maybe even shelter strong enough to hold through the night. That hope was the only thing keeping us going. We didn't talk much anymore, just short commands, eye signals, hand gestures. Every second we expected something to break through the trees. Then we found the second patrol. It was around noon. We'd stopped to filter water when Miller spotted movement downstream. He called us over, and we all went prone in the brush. Across the water, there were people moving. At first glance, they looked like us, gear, uniforms, formation. But they were off sluggish, out of sync. Ramirez pulled out binoculars and went still. I watched his jaw tighten. That's Delta Company. We knew those guys, same training cycle. Shared the range with them just 2 weeks ago. They look messed up, Jackson said quietly. Ramirez said nothing. Then, one of the soldiers tripped and didn't get up. The others didn't even react. They just kept walking, slow and stiff, until the one in the back stopped and turned. That's when we saw its face. Pale, glossy eyes. Half of the cheek was missing. No weapon in hand, just fingers twitching like it couldn't remember what they were for. That wasn't Delta anymore. We watched in horror as the rest turned. They weren't walking. They were drifting forward, like sleepwalkers with purpose. Ramirez hissed, "Fall back, now." We moved quickly and quietly, no talking. Just boots on damp leaves, rifles up, breaths held. That pack of former soldiers stayed on the far side of the water, but it felt like they knew we were there. We didn't run into them again, but we heard them. Later, just before we reached the station, we caught the sound of boots dragging through the brush. Metal clinking, radio static coming from nowhere. It was like they were ghosts wearing the skins of people we once knew. When the ranger station came into view, we were almost too tired to react. It was still standing. Wooden frame, solar panels on the roof, steel-reinforced door. The kind of structure meant to hold out against bears, not walking nightmares. But it was something. We approached slow, guns raised, Ramirez knocking 3 times in the prearranged military pattern. Nothing. Then, one knock back. Inside, we found one man. Ranger, mid-50s, scruffy beard, wide eyes. He had locked every door and blocked every window. Had a radio hooked to a car battery and a shotgun on the table. When he saw our uniforms, he almost cried. "You're the first people I've seen in hours," he said. "They're everywhere. I've been watching from the roof. People coming out of the trees, attacking hikers, dragging them away." Jackson asked the question we were all thinking. "What are they?" The ranger just shook his head. "They're not right. Not sick, not drunk, just gone. Whatever they were, it's not in there anymore." We took shifts on the roof while Ramirez tried the radio again. Static. More warnings. Nothing clear. Then, out of nowhere, a new voice came through. Military band. Faint, but real. "Shelter in place. Avoid contact with the infected. Ground transport is compromised. Evacuation will be attempted at designated zones only. Survival is not guaranteed." That was all. No evac for us. Just 6 soldiers, 1 shotgun-wielding ranger, and a tiny cabin in the middle of a forest full of things that used to be people. We had until nightfall. As the sun dipped below the tree line, everything changed. The forest that had felt tense during the day became suffocating by night. Every crack of a twig echoed louder. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward us. The ranger had a backup generator, but we didn't dare turn it on. Light would only draw attention. We settled into a routine. 2 on the roof, 2 watching the windows. The rest tried to rest, but nobody slept. Around midnight, we heard the first sound. A slow, dragging noise on the gravel outside, followed by another, then a tap on the window. I moved in slowly, careful not to breathe too loud, and peeked past the blackout curtain. 3 of them. One stood right in front of the cabin, rocking side to side like it was waiting for something. The other 2 lingered just outside the trees, watching, not moving, just there. The one near the window suddenly slammed its head against the glass. Once, twice, again. I backed away. Miller was already raising his rifle. Ramirez shook his head. Not yet. But we held our positions, hearts pounding. Eventually, they drifted back into the dark. But that was just the beginning. An hour later, we heard screaming. Not close, but not far enough either. A voice echoing from the woods, male, panicked, yelling for help over and over. Somebody, please, I'm out here. Jackson moved toward the door, but Ramirez stopped him. Trap, he said. They're using it as bait. It felt impossible. How could they know to do that? To trick us? But we didn't move. We waited. The voice kept crying out, weaker each time until it stopped altogether. The ranger broke the silence. They're learning, he said. I saw one yesterday, figured out how to open a car door. Wasn't fast, but it tried. Lang muttered, This isn't just some outbreak. This is evolution. We sat in silence, each of us gripping our weapons like lifelines. Time slowed, we counted every second. Around 3 a.m., the smell hit us. Rot, decay. Like something left to spoil under the sun, only it was seeping through the walls. That meant they were close, maybe all around us. I climbed to the roof with Ramirez to get a better view, and froze. They were everywhere, at least 30, maybe more, moving slowly between the trees, circling the cabin. Some crawled on all fours. Others twitched with each step. Their skin looked slick, almost gray-blue in the moonlight. Limbs moved wrong, necks twisted too far. But worst of all were their eyes, glassy, blank, but somehow aware. One looked right at me. Didn't scream, didn't run. Just watched. Ramirez whispered, They're waiting. For what? I asked. He didn't answer. We reinforced the doors with everything we could find. Tables, chairs, metal bars from the ranger's supply room. We loaded every mag, checked every round. Then we waited for the storm to break. It came at 4:17 a.m. The first crash was on the back door, then the windows, then the front. Dozens of fists and bodies slamming into the structure all at once. The cabin shuddered. We opened fire through the cracks and boarded windows. Controlled bursts, no wasted shots. They didn't scream, didn't flinch, just kept coming, piling against the walls like a wave of meat and bone and instinct. The ranger fired both barrels through the door. One fell, another climbed over it, then another. One of them got its hand through a broken side window. Ramirez crushed it with the butt of his rifle, but not before it reached Lang and dragged him halfway out. Jackson grabbed Lang's vest and pulled with everything he had. I helped. We barely got him free. Lang's leg was torn open. Not a bite, just shredded flesh. He screamed once before passing out. We dragged him to the back room and tied a belt around his thigh to stop the bleeding. No one said what we were all thinking. Outside, the storm grew louder. This wasn't a horde, it was a siege. And we were running out of time. The onslaught reached a fever pitch. For hours, we had struggled in the dim interior of the ranger station, barricaded by hastily arranged furniture and anything heavy enough to deter our attackers. Every thud on the walls and every groan from outside made our hearts pound in unison. With each pulse of fear came the brutal reality of our situation. I checked on Lang again. His leg had been crudely bound by now, the fabric soaked with blood we desperately tried to stem using available cloth. Despite the pain, he fought to stay conscious, his eyes glazing and then sharpening whenever a new sound startled him. His presence reminded us that survival here was a shared will. Every one of us clung to that hope, as if it were the only thread left in a disintegrating tapestry. The ranger, eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and fierce determination, took charge of our dwindling resources. "We hold," he whispered almost to himself, smoothing the edges of a torn curtain against the boarded window. "We live through this night, and then we plan." His voice was a promise and a plea all at once. I took my position by the door and silently recounted every memory of my training, every inch of discipline drilled into me. I could not let fear cloud my judgment. I gripped my rifle, my senses tethered to every movement beyond our fragile shelter. Outside, the relentless siege continued. A cacophony of guttural sounds and splintering wood filled the air. I could hear the occasional scrape of a claw against metal, a dull thump echoing through the hollow night. It was not the fervor of an organized enemy, but the wild, desperate hunger of something that had once been human. I remember a moment of stillness, a pause so brief it lasted less than a heartbeat, when the sound of heavy bootsteps ceased completely. The sudden silence cut through the tension like a knife through cloth. In that moment, our breaths merged with the sound of our pounding hearts. I raised my eyes from my post and caught sight of a single figure drifting across the threshold from the darkness. It moved with a slow, deliberate gait that defied the urgency of its surroundings. I tightened my grip on my weapon as my mind raced through every possibility. Was it one of them, or, against all odds, a survivor? The figure stopped, hands lifting slowly in an almost pleading gesture. In that fraught instant, time seemed to slow, and I felt that this, too, was a test of our humanity. "Open up," came a soft, hoarse plea. It was as if the night itself had whispered a fragile command. My senses screamed caution, but something deep inside urged me to consider that this might be a final chance, perhaps another soul trying to make it through the nightmare. I signaled silently to the others. Miller, Jackson, and even the stoic ranger exchanged quick, nervous glances as I inched toward the door with the safety off. I swung the door open with measured force, my rifle aimed steadily. The figure paused in the threshold. For a long, suspended moment, we stared at one another. I searched the stranger's face, a mask streaked with soot and streaked with the fear of someone who had seen too much. "Please," the survivor croaked, voice fragile yet determined. I was separated from my unit. I've been hiding for hours, trying to avoid them." There was no immediate threat in the person's stance, only the exhausted vulnerability of one who had witnessed the collapse of order. "Who are you?" I demanded softly, my voice low but carrying the weight of military authority. "I'm Corporal Daniels," they replied. I thought I was alone." Their eyes darted past us into the darkness beyond, as if expecting to see something emerging at any moment. The ranger quickly assessed the situation and nodded, his expression solemn. "Bring him in," he ordered, and the others immediately moved to help guide Corporal Daniels inside. Once within our makeshift sanctuary, we helped him remove layers of dirt and grime. Despite his disheveled state, there was a spark in his eyes, an understanding of the price of survival. We quickly learned that Corporal Daniels had been part of a reconnaissance team. His mission had been to monitor and record any unusual activity along a supply route. Instead, he'd encountered chaos, a horde of the infected moving like a dark tide, overwhelming his team one by one. Daniels described desperate, uncoordinated struggles and harrowing escapes into the dark forest, similar to the events we had experienced. His recollections confirmed our worst suspicions. This outbreak was neither isolated nor accidental. It was a transformation of the human condition that defied our expectations. With the weight of this grim news between us, the night seemed to stretch on endlessly. We reassumed our positions along every barrier, every possible point of entry. I found myself revisiting my training once more, realizing that in a situation such as this, discipline was the very essence of survival. As minute after minute passed, the groans and crashes from outside ebbed and flowed with the ferocity of crashing waves against a battered shore. Time bled into one long stretch of anxious waiting, punctuated by small bursts of activity, an incursion at one window here, a near miss at a barricade there. We communicated in whispers and nods, each of us aware that our shared ordeal was forging an unspoken brotherhood within the confines of that small, fortified cabin. Every sound from the storming horde was a reminder of the tenuous line between our world and the new order that had shattered it. By the early hints of dawn, the barrage began to subside. The relentless pounding diminished to slow, sporadic thuds. The groans outside dropped in volume until there was an almost eerie quiet. We emerged from our defensive positions, weapons still ready but lowered slightly as if in mutual acknowledgement of a temporary ceasefire. The night, with all its terror, had given way to a dull, uncertain morning light. I stepped out cautiously to survey the perimeter. The scene was chaotic, a mix of overturned debris, scattered remnants of our last stand, and the lingering presence of those who had tried so desperately to break in. I found no definitive end to the siege, but the attackers had thinned, their numbers seemingly ebbed by our resistance, or perhaps by some unknown force that controlled the night. Inside, we gathered together as a unit. The ranger radioed on every available channel, hoping to catch word of any organized rescue or further instructions from command. All we received was fragmented transmissions, static filled with urgency and despair, but no definitive remedy. In our exhaustion, we began to make plans. The immediate goal was clear: to move. The ranger pointed out a narrow, overgrown trail behind the station, one that could lead to a more fortified position known only to the local forestry service. There was no guarantee of safety or rescue, but staying meant certain exhaustion, and maybe a slow, inevitable end. Before we left, I took a moment to look around the cramped room that had been our temporary sanctuary. Every dent in the metal door, every scratched window and hastily patched corner was a testament to the raw human instinct to fight, endure, and remain hopeful amid unimaginable adversity. I helped secure Lang as best as we could, wrapping his injured leg with whatever cloth and tape we could muster. The ranger passed a last look of determination to us all. We move as a unit. We don't leave anyone behind, he declared, his voice steady despite the situation. His words resonated deep within me, a reminder that even the smallest ember of camaraderie can ignite the will to persist. Step by step, we crept away from the station, rifles leading the way in the gray light of early morning. Every sound was a potential threat. Every shadow might hide another nightmare. Yet, each of us carried the conviction that if we could survive this night, we could forge a new beginning from the ashes of the old world. I led the column along the overgrown path, my mind a churn of memories and fierce resolve. This was no longer just an exercise. It was a trial by fire that would mark the rest of our lives. The infected, the breach, the loss of comrades, they all would be etched into our souls as we pushed forward toward an uncertain future. As we moved deeper into the wilderness, the morning mist swallowed the traces of our former refuge. Behind us, the ranger station receded into shadow, its battered walls a silent witness to the events of the long, relentless night. Ahead, the dense forest awaited, filled with unknown dangers and perhaps a slim chance of hope. I gripped my rifle, each step a measured act of rebellion against the despair that threatened to overtake us. There was no time to look back now. The path stretched before us, a narrow thread of possibility in a world torn apart. In the distance, I could faintly hear the murmur of a running stream. It reminded me of simpler times, of long hikes during training, of quiet conversations among comrades before the weight of responsibility set in. Even now, that sound offered a fragile promise of renewal. We pressed on, the memory of our fallen comrades a constant reminder of what we must protect. Our humanity, our unity, and the burning hope that one day, against all odds, we would rebuild a world where fear no longer reigned. The first light of day cast long shadows on our path as we moved into the uncertain horizon. With every step, I carried the weight of our shared struggle and the belief that tomorrow might bring a new chance. It was in that determination, in the silent pact between every surviving soul, that I found the strength to lead us onward, even as the remnants of the night's horror faded into the background. And so, as the forest welcomed us with quiet vigilance, I vowed to remember every moment of terror and every spark of hope. For though we had witnessed the unfathomable, we were still here. We were still fighting, still believing that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, the light of human resilience could never be fully quenched. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.